So beforehand, so I'll admit, I'm really nervous. I'm super nervous, okay? So I want to take a moment for everyone to help me kind of get in this moment, all right? So I'm not a very formal person normally, and so I kind of can't handle the shoes. So I'm gonna release my shoes. And you know, when we are going to births, a lot of times, you know, there can be a lot of uncertainty. I mean, no one can ever plan how birth goes. And so one of the grounding things we do is we try to feel our feet on the floor. You know, so I just want to ask everyone to join me feeling your feet on the floor. Just, you can keep your shoes on or off, whatever, but just take a moment. Take a deep breath. There's been some hard topics today, some beautiful topics. Inhale and exhale, and feel your feet on the floor. Feel your sits bones on your chair. Let weight be on one side and the other. And now find balance. And now I want you to take a deep breath and hold in that thought that there's a great forgiveness for the speaking about you. And let that breath go. So thank you for helping me in that grounding exercise, because that's what I needed to do, and I appreciate your help. So, how far down can I get this? It wasn't working if I pinned it. Oh, all right. All right. So for first, you know, we all create community in wherever we are, and some of it we're born into, some of it we're given. And one of the really foundational communities that I have is a circle of mothers that we've all kind of birthed their babies together, we've raised them together. And one of the things that we do when we have our gatherings to prepare for an upcoming birth is we introduce ourselves in our circles. And so I'm going to introduce myself in the circle. This is a totally invented cultural expression. We have invented this because it gives us meaning. But I'm going to introduce myself in that way because I feel like it's important. And it's important for the work that I do. It's important for the conversations that are taking place today. It's important for all the work that all of us do. So to start, my name is Rebecca Polston. I'm the mother of Samuel, Tristan, and Zara. They are 12, 10, and 7. I am the daughter of Cassandra, who is the granddaughter of Irma. I'm the great-granddaughter of Sally, who was born free, and Beata, who was not. We can't go back further. That's it. The line's cut. That's as far back as we can go, and I think it's actually pretty precious that we have the name of the last person in our family who was born in slavery. Her name is Beata. I actually just learned her name in March, which is when I actually finally learned her name from my great uncle, who was 90. I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a spouse, I identify as African American, I'm a midwife, I'm a business owner. And a lot of these terms, you know, it's easy to identify, oh, I know where to put the peg of I'm a mother. I'm a spouse, right? Like, these are familiar terms. You clear up a couple of terms to help talk about my work. As the owner of Roots Community Birth Center, I'm a midwife, and that is a foundational part of my identity. It is part of who I am. It is etched in my bones. Whether I wanted that to happen or not, that is what happens when you step into this work. A midwife is trained and many times licensed. I'm a licensed healthcare provider. I'm licensed by the Board of Medical Practice. I'm trained in normal birth. I am not a doula. Doulas are also magical, amazing, wonderful people, but they provide emotional and physical support, but they're not medical professionals. I like to joke, the doulas keep your heart in, and we keep the blood in. So just those are terms that frequently get mixed up, so I decided to clarify that for people. And I run a freestanding birth center. So a birth center is not in a hospital, and it is not in a home. It is a licensed facility that exists outside of a hospital. They're independent, and we do prenatal care, postpartum care, classes, and people actually give birth in our center. So that helps kind of set the stage for where we are today in this work. Midwives are not a new thing. Really, for the past 100 years, midwives have always been the attendants at birth. That has looked different ways in different places and different cultures. It is not purely the mechanics of getting babies out of people, getting human beings outside of the body of another human being, but the process that we facilitate is also the birthing of parents, the birthing of mothers, the birthing of fathers, the birthing of families. And so that's really what separates midwives from, now there are many amazing doctors who do this too, but that's what midwives do. Those are the nuts and bolts of it, right? But if any of us reduce ourselves to just our labels, is that really who we are? Is that really just how we are in the world? Those are the easy descriptions that help us make an introduction to someone. Hey, this is what I do, this is where I do it, and this is who brought me into the world, and this is who's going to take me out, right? I mess up. So, my father is from England. He is white. He is the son of Gertrude. My grandmother Polston was in London during World War II. Her husband, my grandfather, flew for the Royal Air Force in combat in the European theater. I was given a story as a child of my very pregnant grandmother, a young woman running towards a bomb shelter in London while it was being bombed. Air raid sirens going off. She's super, super pregnant. Anyone who's been super, super pregnant knows that it's really hard to run. It's hard. And no one would stop and help her. She couldn't keep up. And all people were running towards the bomb shelter. And they left her behind the alley. And she was like, I can't make it. She was super pregnant. And the bomb shelter was hit. Everyone was killed. And she lived. And she was moved with a lot of other pregnant women out of the city to the countryside. And they lived in these villages, and that's where they had their babies, away from their families, away from their friends, away from their communities. And in place in a context, this is, so she had her babies right at the end of World War, like in World War II and right at the end of World War II, so she had her babies with what's called midwives. Right, that's her contemporary, that's her life, that was her world. But I didn't hear a romantic story about birthing like this. It was terrible, it was terrifying. They were at war. You know, I mean, everyone died because a bomb hit them. Like, this wasn't a romantic view of birth and life. I never got to know my British side because that line is interrupted as well. That knowledge base is interrupted. And it is interrupted because when I went to England to meet my British family, they said, oh, you're the daughter of Glenn, that's my dad. We heard he married a Negro lady. And I was just like, I must have the wrong number. Because that was in 1998. So there was no need to go back further. If that's still where they were, that wasn't something, that wasn't a story I needed. And that's by choice. And I've been back to England many times, actually, and I just don't bother. But I do still keep looking to see how far back I can go on my mother's side, because it is important to me. As a midwife, I have a lot of privilege. I get to stand in this space, and anyone else who goes to birth work, I know that there's a few other birth workers in the room. It is a sacred space. It is a space through which all of us enter this world. Every single one of us. And it happens at home, it happens in birth centers, it happens in hospitals, it happens in operating rooms, and it is always a sacred experience. And as a midwife, we do a lot of paperwork, we do a lot of cleaning, we do a lot more paperwork. We do those charts, you know, the ones that your doctors write all the notes in about you, that are supposed to like condense everything about you so that they know what medicine to give you. We do a lot of that stuff too, and it's terrible. It's as terrible to write it as it is to have it. Spend a lot of time dealing with insurance. Oh, God, that's terrible. But in between all those things, I actually get to be a midwife, and I get to see the magic. And that's kind of the central point of what I want to talk about, because this is a magic that I get to see, and to a certain extent I'm very lucky because it's just kind of handed to me every time the phone rings, that I get to stop the world and be in a space with a family. And it is hard work. Anything worth doing is hard, right? Like anything. Having a baby is hard work. And that hard work doesn't just happen during labor. When our families come to us, they come for lots of different reasons. Some people want a natural birth. Some people want to just not be in a hospital. They can't quite say why they don't want to be in a hospital. Maybe it's their first baby. They don't like hospitals. Some people have been in hospitals and had babies in hospitals, and there's just no way to come back there. Some people just want to feel safe. And they want to feel culturally safe. And that is the point of why I created Roots, was to create a space where people could be safe in their birthing. And I'm not just talking about physically safe, I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually, and culturally safe. But so what happens to make this magic happens in the prenatal time. Very little of it actually happens in the birth. A lot of you thought that was what I was going to talk about, right? How amazing a birth is. How amazing it is to see a baby come out of someone. It is pretty cool. But the magic happens in the months leading up to and in the months after. So I see families come to me, women, men, girls, boys, all ages. And I'm not putting those labels on them. These are how people describe themselves. Different places in their life. Some don't identify with binary genders. Those folks are also seeking safety in their birthing. And what happens is through this time that we sit, all of their stories start to come out. And part of learning to be a midwife is learning to sit with other people's stories. It's learning to sit with their stories and balance it against their hemoglobin. Because there's no point in giving someone a certain medication if that's not what's going to fit with their story, right? Like, we have to craft our health. And our health isn't just about our bodies, it's about our identity, it's about our souls, it's about our relationships to other people. That's where our health lies. And as midwives, we get to sit and watch people tell their stories of health. Tell their stories of their labor before their babies even come. And we get to hold that space. And then when it's time for their birthing time, they birth these children, and it is a really cool experience. But they don't just birth babies, they birth themselves as parents. They birth themselves as families. They birth their parents and the grandparents. Because your parents don't get to be grandparents unless you have a baby. They give birth to brothers and sisters. And they do the amazing work of dismantling who they are and reassembling it with who they're going to be. And that's the work of birth. And that's the work of midwives. And ours is specifically shaped around when babies are born, but lots of people are midwives in your life. Teachers are midwives. Clean people are midwives. They create clean spaces for you to do the work of building your story. I grew up in a small town in Maryland, about 40 miles outside of DC. Maryland suburbs. It was maybe 1,000 people when we moved there, Polston. And it was the kind of place where the kids ran free, like we got to do whatever we wanted. We was all in the sewers, we climbed trees, we walked everywhere. There were corded phones on the wall. It was kind of like Stranger Things, like for real. People even smoked everywhere, like they smoked in the house, they smoked in the grocery store. But there wasn't an alternate dimensional monster, it was a real monster. So this idyllic town also had a clan. 40 miles from the capital of this country. And the first time I heard about AIDS was because the Klan burned a cross on the lawn of a woman in town who had AIDS. She was a straight white woman who got AIDS from a medical procedure, and the Klan burned the cross on her lawn. I remember hearing about families that had been on the same land for generations, and it wasn't until I got to my teen years I realized that they'd been sharecropping the same land for generations. And this is in the 80s. Like, people were still sharecropping the same land. And so I lived in this town with my African American mother, my white British father. My mom was a cop. My dad was a stay-at-home dad. So we took all the stereotypes, kind of put them in a jar and shook them up and dumped them out and said, this is how our family looks. And I had this very British upbringing from my dad, where we had tea every day, we always listened to BBC. Like, I spelled gray with an E, spelled color with an O-U, that kind of stuff. And my mom was a cop, like a full-on, like we had a police car in the driveway, cop, a gun that lived on top of the fridge, because they didn't lock them up back then here. And she was the first African-American cop on the force. And it was hard. And she received a lot of hazing, which I didn't even hear about until I was in my 30s. I mean, she didn't tell me about it. But I grew up with this idea that women were strong and powerful and in charge and had the sirens and the street lights turn off. And that's what a black woman was. And that was not what society wanted me to be. It's not what our small town that had a clan wanted of us or of our family. But my parents were pioneers. I'd love to say that they stuck it out, that they're like happily married today. They're not. My mom came out when I was 12. And so then I got to have the experience of living my life as this burgeoning young woman raised in a queer community with all these other grown women who had come out and were like living freedom for the first time with their sexuality. So I got to go to feminist camp, and I got to be around a bunch of women who were like, oh, you're so strong. They never told me I was pretty. You're so strong, you know. And it was, I mean, it was awesome. It was a great way to be a teenager, you know. And I went to school in DC, so I went to school in this amazing cosmopolitan city. Like, my parents were very clear, like, this town, you can't go to school in the local school, it's not working. We're mixed race, now we've got a purple front door and a rainbow flag, it's not going well. So let's go to the city and go to school there. So I went to an alternative high school, and that was the first time that I really, and this is my story. I'm not saying that this has to be someone else's story, but this is my story. I had been mixed up until that time. I had always identified as a mixed person. I'm English and African American. That was who I was. And as I went to high school in Washington, D.C., in this very progressive school, that was when I became black. And that's not a bad thing for me. For me, that was a powerful time where I learned to not try to water down the legacy my mother was giving me, and to accept that the cultural, what I was getting from my dad was intact culture, and that's an okay thing too. Like, it's okay to have intact culture. And it was a powerful realization, and this was during the first Gulf War as well. So we were also having it was the first time we were talking about the ban on gays in the military too. I mean, this is all going on when I'm in high school and someone's telling me, you're black. I'm like, what's that mean? I don't know what that means. And there's a war, and it was an amazing journey of disassembling who I was and why I thought I was the person I was, and deciding how to reassemble it as who I am. And giving myself permission to do that. Being a teenager is awesome. I came to Minnesota to go to college. I went to school not too far from here in McAllister. And did my civil rights degree. No. Everyone there is in the top of their class, read a lot of books, takes pictures. That's good. But I later became a community organizer. And learning to organize. So first in high school, I learned how to name myself, right? And that's on a continuous process. As a community organizer, I learned to decenter that. To decenter my journey of self from work for others. It, of course, it informs it. It imbues it with its energy. But in my community organizing, I learned that it's not just about me, it's also about other people, it's about people I'm connected to, and how can we make this place better for all of us. And it was a really humbling experience. I worked in Minneapolis neighborhoods for about 10, 11 years, organizing both on the south side and on the north side. And it was there that I learned not just about who I am and who other people are and what race is and what racism is. I learned what racism was. I learned that racism wasn't about someone being mean to me or calling me names, or racism was why there was a chemical cleaning plant in the neighborhood. Racism was why none of the African American folks in the neighborhood owned their own homes. Racism was why there were these larger systems that were designed on purpose to define who we are, to define what we do with it, and to define how we make up money at it. And that was some of the happiest times of my life and some of the hardest work I've ever done. It's also where I met my husband. My husband who is white, who was the first person who saw me for me, and who we formed our relationship in the crucible of this work. So while I was working in North Minneapolis, I had also been a doula. Remember I talked before about what doulas are. I was fascinated by birth ever since I was a teenager. I was like, okay, so I'm doing all this social justice work, but babies are cool. Like, oh my God, women's bodies do cool stuff, and they make babies. I need to know. And I just couldn't stay away. The first birth I went to, I thought I was doing a documentary about welfare reform and pregnancy. I'm not a documentary filmmaker. I put down the camera and I was just playing there for this mom, and I was her doula. I didn't know what a doula was, but I was just there for her. And she was a single mom, having her second baby, and I rubbed her back, I was present, I held space, and the midwives were like, you should do this. And I'm like, what is this? I gotta do this. I don't know what this is, but I'm an organizer. I work all the time. And I slowly started talking to other people about what it is that I wanted to do. And I realized I wanted to be around birth. So I started going to doula births and helping folks out. I eventually transitioned out of community organizing, and I was a full-time doula at HCMC, which is a big county hospital. And it was awesome because for one of the first times in Minnesota, I was surrounded by brown people. Like, everyone having babies there was brown. Everybody. The staff was all white, but all the people having babies was brown. And it was like, oh my God, this is my people. We're having babies together. And I also realized that I couldn't be a part of that system. Because all staff was white. All people birthing were brown. And the teaching hospital of white staff was practicing on all the brown people. A lot of undocumented women who didn't speak English. There was no such thing as consent. And I was like, I can't do this. And that's when it became really clear to me that I had to become a midwife. Because I couldn't work in someone else's system. And that's why I became the type of midwife that I am. And very specifically, a midwife that's trained in out-of-hospital birth, because I came to the very clear, bell-ringing clear realization that these systems are not built for us. There is not a single large system in this country that is built with our interests in mind. Period. Some of them do better jobs than others, but that if I wanted to create safe birth, then I had to create space that was not in a system that was designed to oppress us. So I had a very clear vision that I'd become a midwife, which I did. I make it sound easy, it wasn't. And I decided to open the Roots Community Birth Center. And I opened it in North Minneapolis in September of 2015. We are a for-profit birth center. A lot of people want to believe that we are a nonprofit, that I got some free money from some great people to open this birth center. I did not. I borrowed money from the government with the help of a lot of amazing organizations here. And I wanted to say that health and well-being for brown and black bodies can be a successful business. That I wanted equity, I did not want charity. That I wanted equitable access to the same insurance contracts and to the same funds, because the birth centers around are doing very, very well, the other ones. I looked and I saw that 58% of the babies born in the Twin Cities are born to women of color, and that the other birth centers in town were serving less than 1% of their clientele of people of color. So there's also a place where that stops being about, we don't have to talk to people. If their money isn't green, somehow our money isn't green. So I opened Roots in, like I said, in September of 2015. And I think somebody was the fifth baby born? Fourth? Yeah. Fourth baby born in the center. We do things a little differently. We take an hour most of the time for our prenatals. We sit and we talk about what's going on in people's lives. We don't see culture as pathology. We don't see it as something that needs to be overcome in order for me to provide care to you. Culture is what makes you healthy. So therefore, if we don't work on who you are and create space for that, then how are you going to have a healthy, that's not health, if you've had to disassociate who you are from the experiences you're having, especially something as transformative as birth. Part of our mission is also to train other midwives of color. Right now, I'm one of only 2 midwives of color in the state of Minnesota practicing outside of the hospital. There's a whopping 7 other ones working in the hospital. And one of our recent graduates is here. Where do we go with all this, right? Like, here's my story. I've worked through these aspects of who I am, and I work hard to create space for other people, but what do you do with it, right? Like, not everyone's going to go out and become a midwife, or not everyone's going to go out and open a business. And I'm not saying that you should. That's not what you should do. The reason why I said yes to come and to share this story, to share this journey, is to talk about the ways in which all of us can write our own stories for who we are to make the world a better place. Because it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing, you're in a struggle. You might be an accountant, you're in a struggle. You might be hauling trash, you're in a struggle. And all of us are, because we're moving through this space. And let's be really honest, it seems a little stressful these days. The atmosphere in our country is hard. But I want to kind of give some perspective. It's always been hard for someone somewhere. It's just our turn. And we are so ready to do something about it because unlike 80 years ago, we've got terms like intersectionality. We can do different work, we can do better work. It's all building on this body of work, right? So I wanted to talk about, I was thinking, like, what do I do, what should I be doing in this work? And I came up with 5 tools. And so I call these like my 5 strategies for survival in the struggle, okay? So the first one is back each other up. Some people call it intersectionality. You know that line, none of us are free, none of us are free? Yeah. That one? It's for real. Even if you disagree with someone, you need to speak up for them. You need to speak up often. An example of this, here's a really practical example that people can take out to the world. I don't know if people work in offices and stuff like that, because you can be super radical even in an office setting, is amplification. Does anyone know what amplification is? This is something that the women in the Obama administration came up with. Love my Obama. So they would still, even in Obama's White House, women would get silenced in meetings, and so what they would do is they just repeat what a woman said, enough, until other people were like, oh, there's an idea on the table. Do this for people in your life. Do this for people who should be heard even if you disagree with them, because their ideas just to be talked about. Back each other up, be there for each other. If this is an area you're not comfortable with, work on it. If you don't have the words for it, work on it. We have this amazing thing called Google. We can learn almost anything. Are you not comfortable? Like, take that moment to say, what am I not comfortable doing? Am I not comfortable speaking up for trans folks? Then I gotta work on that, okay? If I'm not comfortable speaking up for the poor, I gotta work on that. I do not have a language for class, I gotta work on that. That brings me to number 2, do better. That means stretching beyond our comfort zone, but also deepening in what we know. Everyone needs coaching, so get coached. Top athletes, a great midwifery trainer talked to us about this. Top athletes have trainers. They have coaches and they practice. So why do we think that we don't need to do that too? Let yourself be coached. Let yourself learn. And this This midwifery trainer also gave us the beautiful insight. This woman in her 60s, she said, what I do starting when I was 50, and I was training all these midwives, and I realized that I was not doing such a great job, is I decided to become a student. And so every year she decides to learn something new. So she always remembers what it's like to be a student and to not be the expert in the room. Every year she tries something new, and she humbles herself at the place of learning. We need to do this. We need to do this for each other. We need to do this for each other's stories, each other's lives. Advocacy, activism, and holding space takes practice. Let others teach you how to do it. Do you know how to hold space for your Asian American brothers and sisters? I'm just picking a random, random. If you don't, then be coached by someone who does. Find someone else who's doing it, and let them coach you. And it can be whatever is coming to the front. The universe puts in front of you what you need to address. So do better. Third tool I would say is take the long view. Opening the birth center, it is so easy to deal with the male in front of me. Right? It comes in the door, I open it, it's a male, it's a bill, it's terrible. But take the long view. Where do you want to be in 6 months? A year? When you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 70? Think about the work you do as creating a body of work. A lot of times this is talked about for artists, right? This is their body of work over their life. Well, guess what? All of us are doing that in all of our work. So give it the attention that you would. It's not about just today's meeting. It's about what happens in 5 years and where do you want to be and how you deepened. Go back to number 1 and 2 on how to get there, right? Number 4 is share the load. You're not alone. You are not alone. White allies need to step in without being asked and step up without being asked. And this is the post-it you can take back to white allies who might not be here and just give that to them. This is all you have to do. Do it without being asked. And if you don't know how, see number 2, which was be coached. In forums or organizations where you are one of the only people speaking for justice, seek out others and take turns. I'm like, for real. Like, say, this is the person who'll talk today or post on Facebook today because I'm taking a break. I can't do it today. Take turns. Literally, you're not alone. Don't do it all. And lastly, self-care. For real, self-care. Take a moment, turn it off, tune out, get a massage, take a walk. I think it's called forced bathing now. Cook for joy. Support those around you to do the same. Hold them accountable in it. If you're a friend, help your friends do this. If you have trouble doing this, get help, see a counselor. Care for your mental health like you would a sick kitten. With love, with tenderness, and expediency. We all have to do this if we're going to keep going together. And for you to create that body of work that's important for you, you can't do it on an empty gas tank. Like, I think we all need to make this a new t-shirt that we all wear all the time. Take care of yourself. I'll make a lot of memes for it. It'll be okay. So I share all of those things, all those ideas, and honestly, these are the things that people around me have been screaming at me to do for myself too. So I'm not saying I'm an expert at these. They're just what I'm working on. And we're trying to build that into the work that we do at Roots to create a space where this is the culture, where this is the norm. Because this is the type of space in which we all get to grow. I hope you find these tools helpful. I hope you find my story helpful.
Yes.
Thank you for being in this space. Thank you.